Welcome to the Digital Directions podcast. I'm Jack Hewitt, the founder of Digital Directions. Joining me is our stellar guest, David Nelson, our head of software procurement and former co-founder of LeapGen. David brings a wealth of experience in HR tech and digital strategy, particularly for businesses in the mid-enterprise space. In this episode, we dive deep into when is the right time to invest in new HR systems, how to enhance the employee experience, and navigating the crowded HR software market. Let's jump in.
I don't know about you, but I'm kind of ignoring that camera.
Absolutely. This is my first time in like a podcast environment.
No, it's same. It's very cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, David, thanks so much for being here today. I know this is our very first episode on the Digital Directions podcast. Stoked to have you here.
Jack, thank you. Awesome to be here as well, and I love this topic, so can't wait to dive into the conversation with you, mate.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. So on today's conversation, we're going through a really big question. When is the right time to purchase a new HR system? And, naturally, as we jump into this conversation a bit more today, we're going to kind of go through all the different types of HR. What are those different types of challenges businesses are facing? But what does that kind of question mean to you?
Well, if I was flippant, I'd say yesterday is the best time. But it's I love small business.
Yeah.
It's the engine of our economy. People out there kind of growing small businesses, they've got so many challenges.
Yeah.
Competitors, going to market, managing teams, sales and the like.
Yeah.
It's understandable where HR and HR tools and HR software doesn't necessarily kind of reach the top of the agenda. Yeah. And so we kind of see this systematic underinvestment from time to time in HR tools and software. Yeah. So it's something that we want to educate and build awareness around the range of tools that are out there, the quality of the tools, and the ROI that you can get from having these kind of best of breed modern systems in your business. So it doesn't necessarily mean it needs to happen today, but there's lots of really critical drivers and strong reasons why you can get a great return from investing in a system like that.
I loved yesterday. We hear that every single day with our customers, and it's typically based on reaction. Something's going on that's causing a challenge. They're struggling. And so let's take a step back. I can hear the passion. You're really keen to dive into it today, but we're just going to go back to who are we? Why are we here today having this conversation before we get a little bit deeper? So I'd love for you to introduce yourself, David. Why are you in this room with me today talking about when to buy a new HR system?
Well, it's been an interesting journey to get to here. I've had a career where I've invested in software businesses, I've run software businesses, so I know that space. I know the economics and the power of software as a business model. And then I've had, I guess, kind of a stretch of my career as a consultant advising, small, medium and large companies around digital HR strategy. So I've had lots of conversations with clients about challenges they face, the realities out there in terms of genuine, meaningful HR transformation. And so that's a lot of great experience and I guess background to help me and help us at Digital Directions give good advice, give practical, impactful advice to small and medium companies in and around HR software. So that's kind of what gets me to the table, and I love having these conversations.
It's a privilege for us to have you in this conversation today, given your level of experience and what you can bring to the table. And for me, that's about adding value, being a true advisor and consultant to our customers, because I think, and we're going to get into this in more detail, I think everyone is just a little bit over being sold to. That's typically the feeling these people leaders have, is they're being sold to, and all these software vendors and their people are fantastic at doing that. So we really want to kind of remove that and really take on board a consultative approach and really add value.
You saw HR technology proliferating. The range of options out there is huge. Who's helping small and medium businesses? Plenty of consultants out there that you can get to help large businesses. Who's helping the small business navigate that challenge? I think that was the gap in the market that we're here to address.
The conversation specifically today is identifying when that time is to purchase a new HR system. I think from my experience and what we've really seen the last 12 months in business is there's a couple of key challenges businesses are facing, but also a couple of key timelines. The first that we hear every single day is a legacy system. They've had them for the last 10, 15 plus years, and they're really struggling with those old systems. So I'd love to go into a bit more detail about the struggle that they're having with legacy systems and why modern enterprise businesses or software vendors in the HR space are booming and exploding. The second side of the timeline that we're starting to see is around small, medium businesses, 50 to 100 employees, now starting to grow their own kind of practice and now needing a HR system for the first time with the changes of government legislation, the compliance risk, needing quick access and efficient access to people data. What else are you kind of seeing around this idea of when is the right time? What is the timeline for purchasing a system?
Let's start from the basis that HR payroll, first and foremost, is around compliance. So when companies are finding that just from a pure compliance point of view, they're not delivering on expectations, that's a key driver for we need to look at our systems. Then, you start to think about, these systems don't live alone. They're not an island. They're part of an ecosystem. Even a small business, have dozens of IT systems that need to be married together. A typical one is where there's just a lack of integration, where their HR system doesn't talk to payroll, where HR doesn't talk to training, or it doesn't talk to other key business systems. That drives kind of lack of data consistency, fragmentation, things become manual, there's a lot of duplication.
Yep.
That lack of integration and having a really holistic view of your tech stack, that's a key driver, that's a key frustration that we hear from clients all the time. That's kind of the fundamentals. So we'll meet a customer where they're at, but that is a really kind of common themes of what people are suffering with that kind of drives timelines around HR software. Yeah. Beyond that, as you kind of start to kind of climb the pyramid almost, that's when you're starting to look at growth. We started out as a 100-person company, but we're growing rapidly. Our old system, our old spreadsheets, or our old kind of basic system doesn't fit the need anymore. Outgrowing your systems, that's another critical one. And we're all about helping customers make decisions for the long term. So that's critical. And then I guess, you hear a lot about the war for talent. Having systems that give today's employees, today's workforce, a really intuitive, a really engaging experience as they're using your business systems. We all expect it day to day in our consumer systems. People expect that when they log on for work as well. Yeah. That systems that they can speak to are simple, intuitive, they get the job done. They're kind of where you start to really deliver strong ROI. If all of the basics are working well, then bringing on systems that start to deliver that kind of employee experience are kind of the next level of the next kind of wave of that drives timelines.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that we've been speaking about a lot offline and with our customers, typically kind of people leaders or champions, trying to get kind of the decision-making kind of weight behind them to go out to market and purchase, or might have gone through that engagement to identify new HR systems, but then kind of get stuck right at the end, whether it's a CFO or a CEO kind of blocking them and just going, hang on, before we go and make this big investment, let's actually talk about ROI. And I think it's something that we see quite a lot is how do we actually measure and quantify what is return on investment with a new HR system? And I think this is becoming more prevalent in these types of engagements, and it's becoming an easier thing to answer now with data and your point around kind of empowering the workforce, the key themes of, a warfare for talent and ensuring that we're retaining great talent. We've all heard the great statistics around how much it costs to rehire someone who is really good in the business and just give them a raise because it's a better return on investment than going to market and trying to find someone who fits the salary bucket. But something that we spoke about offline, which I think is really important to talk about, is kind of this explosion. Yeah. There's been an absolute explosion of tools, particularly in the HR market. Maybe this was through COVID where we kind of saw, hey, there's a really big need to retain and grow and the talent pool just became more aggressive. Talk to me about the explosion in your view. What happened? What was the key moment of why there were so many different HR tools that all of a sudden popped up overnight and almost made it even harder for our buyers to go and identify what is the right system for them? Because I guess at face value, and I think there's I guess, a lot of truth to this. They all kind of do somewhat the same thing. Some just have a bit of a different color or logo than the other, and they're all similarly kind of like price match. What does that look like to you? What was the explosion of new tools?
I think it's just been a growing recognition over a long time frame, but accelerated in the last 5 to 10 years, that people are a business's greatest asset. So we need systems that will address and support and empower people. And so, software companies have invested in building and delivering on those compared to what we had 20 years ago. So I think it's been driven by market need, and what it's I guess created is, as you say, this kind of paradox of choice, where buyers of HR software, and in particular it's so hard for small to medium-sized businesses who don't have the in-house resources, don't have the expertise necessarily to know where to start. You've got best of breed point solutions that might just do one part of the process. There might be employee listening, or there might be compensation management, and then you've got others where it's all in one box, all under one solution. You've got the full service HCM suites, and so even before choosing a solution, people need to kind of understand from a tech stack point of view what's going to be the best fit for purpose for them. So there's so much to unpack, and that's the conversation that we have with our clients to help them understand what's going to meet their needs, what's going to be the right price point in the market, how to work with them to understand the needs. And you also talked earlier, and I want to come back to it, stakeholders. It's a really common theme that you'll get an HR manager, a payroll manager. They're the sponsor. They're the ones who identify the need and start to go to market. But decision-making won't happen effectively. It won't happen smoothly. You won't necessarily get the right outcome unless you're actually broadly getting the consensus and a clear view from all of your internal stakeholders, because everyone's got a skin in the game. Everyone's got a seat at the table when it comes to an HR system, when it comes to a payroll system. So we need to understand what are the needs of each of those different groups. What does a finance team need out of that? What's an HR team? What do leaders and managers need? What do employees need? We need to build a really kind of broad view of all of the needs of a business for a system before we can start to assess the market. So helping them with stakeholder management, helping them with a really clear, robust decision-making process, get those fundamentals right, then you're going to make a good choice.
I think another really key thing that we hear quite frequently is people's experience, whether it's their current situation or at a prior employment. They've had some sort of experience across the whole suite, whether that's purchasing, using the tool as an administrator or as an end user, maybe having a dabble in procuring and identifying and evaluating different systems. But everyone's had this kind of sense of experience in, hey, I've implemented a solution before. They promised us it'd be 12 weeks. It went for 12 months, or it never went live. I think this notion of their prior experience is something we hear about a lot and can cause quite a lot of confusion during our evaluation process. And I think we had a great example with one of our customers at the end of last year, which was around they wanted us to throw in 5 more software vendors that they had experience with, but weren't kind of conceptualizing that into the business that they're at now. Just totally unsuitable to be actually part of the mix of software vendors. Talk to me about kind of the horror stories that people have had with their experience or touch points with other softwares at a prior job or their current situation.
I think you've picked up on, in my mind, 2 really important themes that need to be understood and addressed in order to make good decisions. One is kind of this concept of like anecdotal evidence. My colleague over here used System X in the past, so there's kind of an anchoring, well, I like that system, and you get very focused on that. And we need to help kind of go beyond that. We need to be able to build, key criteria, key elements of what we're looking for in a system, what we're looking for in a vendor. Mm-hmm. So start with the needs of the business, start with the needs of the organization, and work backwards from there. Because the other theme that I think happens all the time and doesn't necessarily create a healthy environment is getting sucked into a vendor process too early. You identify a need for a new system, you do your Google search, find a couple of names, reach out to them, and then suddenly these very, very sophisticated, slick, well-run sales and marketing operations draw you into their process.
Absolutely.
And you're now working on a timeline. You're now working through a process that meets their needs, not yours.
100%.
So, whether you call that a horror story or just kind of words of experience, what we want to kind of support and enable our customers to do is kind of focus on them. And we've got this concept of an ideal vendor profile. So we go through discovery, we do a broad stakeholder analysis, we understand what their key needs are, what's going to drive ROI. We take all of that and then formulate this concept of an ideal vendor profile in terms of functionality, in terms of kind of positioning in the market,
Budget envelope.
budget, local versus international, how they support their methodologies. All of that gives us a blueprint. It gives us a template that is suited to the customer, and that's even before we engage with a single vendor. And if you do that, then you're starting to engage on your terms. You're talking about issues that are critical to the customer, not where the vendor wants you to talk. So those are that's the process that we can support them to implement to avoid these kind of horror stories that you hear from elsewhere.
David, that sounds expensive. That sounds like an expensive process for a customer to come through to use an external consultant to help them make a decision. Obviously, we understand that we can be valuable to our customers, but something that we hear a lot is, so I'm going to pay you to help me pay for a system. It sounds like it's stacking up really quick. What do you think is a main value driver for why a customer or someone out in market looking for a new tool should actually seek some advice?
I think it's a great question, and not only do we need to be able to kind of justify and demonstrate our value, anyone who's spending money on a consultant wants to be really clear about what they're getting back for that investment. Where it starts for me is, what is the cost to your business? What is the risk to your business if your people systems and your payroll systems are not fit for purpose? That's the starting point. You might be a 500-person company. What does it mean for employee attrition? What does it mean for employee productivity and employee engagement if your systems are not supporting and enabling and empowering your staff? The value on that, it's even hard to put a dollar on, but that is fundamental to business value. So that's the domain here. That's where we're starting. Secondly, think about, you spoke about it before, these are systems that you're putting in for 5, 10, 15 years. So the kind of investment that you are making over that horizon is very large. That's a lot of dollars down the drain, or you have to throw a system out after 2 years and start again.
Yeah.
The kind of cost to your business of doing that is significant.
Yeah.
So I think they're the risks, they're the hidden costs that we're trying to avoid. And so for someone like us as a consultant, if by employing a really kind of robust and thorough process with a client to help them get to a good outcome, the cost of engaging an advisor compared to what you save in terms of potential damage to your business, I think the trade-off is pretty clear.
One horror story that comes to mind for a customer that we worked with last year was they had purchased a system. They'd gone through the whole sales cycle over a long period of time. It was a big investment for them, growing quick, kind of a frontline worker, transient workforce, needed a time and attendance, HCM, payroll, a really seamless integrated ecosystem. They weren't able to achieve that, and they went through an entire implementation for 18 months, and it never went live. This business spent over $150,000 with this software vendor, and unfortunately, they were oversold kind of the intended benefits of what are they going to get out of the system. And I think it's these types of horror stories that we hear on a frequent basis, and we really try and take on board the learnings. And whilst it is shocking that you're spending that much money and having to redo it 24 months later, but I think the key thing is, how do we take the learnings from that? What was missing in that process to pick and choose that HR software that then never went live 18 months later. It's a big cost to wear, but naturally there's a lot of learnings. How do people kind of, learn from these types of stories and not make that decision themselves?
And you feel for customers in clients and organisations in this situation. It's heartbreaking, and for them to live through that is so tough, and we do see it all too frequently, unfortunately. I come back to a few things. One, the process by which we select a system needs to be thorough and robust, driven by the needs of the customer, not what the vendor's trying to position and to sell to you, and thinking about the overall ROI, the overall investment. It's easy to kind of get sucked into just looking to minimize cost. What's the ticket price here?
Yeah.
Really, the key risk here is the system fails. The system doesn't support your workforce. The implementation doesn't work. So having a really balanced view of what the ROI is, what the overall investment is, where we need to focus, and being able to do that with a supportive advisor away from the pressure of a vendor, that's a healthy process. I think the other critical element, and I think this is where the digital directions business model is really powerful, is having a life cycle view. It's not just about buying, it's about evaluating, contracting, implementing, and optimizing. And so by going into a process right from the start with that full horizon in mind, you're more likely to make better decisions. That dollar you save by, choosing the lowest cost vendor actually comes back to bite you when their implementation methodologies aren't suitable for your business, or they don't have the local on the ground support to help you as you grow. So again, it's about thinking for the long term, having a process that's going to get you the right outcome. So I think that's how people can be thinking about it. That's the kind of philosophy that we bring as advisors to try and get the best outcome.
Something you touch on there is really important around kind of success criteria, and how does a business kind of weight what their priorities are in evaluating a new system with functionality. What is this going to cost me? All those different types of things. And something that we see during our particular engagement of procurement is what are the key drivers of what's a need and what's a want, and what are the things you must have and what would be nice to have. And I think it's probably, from my perspective anyway, pretty surprising how little they kind of go down the list. There's like a couple of really key things, and then everything else is kind of, this would be nice. But I think they should double down on, no, this is something I need to really articulate and evaluate with the software vendor. How well do you hit that? Like this notion of they can do it. It's so easy to ask a question, and during the demonstration of a product, they go, oh yeah, we can do something like that. We see that all the time. How do you actually test that without, something else that comes up quite a lot is a trial. Oh, we'd like to just jump in and have a little trial and get around and play around in your system. But, going off a software salesperson's kind of response to say, yeah, we can do that. How would you advise a customer who's stuck in this, the wants, the needs, the must-haves, the nice-to-haves? How do we go a little bit deeper on actually trialing and evaluating, this is something we really need, but I can't test it?
I think there's a couple of elements that you've raised there that I guess try to unpack. One, if you're a sponsor who's kind of leading a procurement process internally, you've got other stakeholders kind of in the game, you want to be realistic about what the ROI is that you're driving towards, and you want to be able to build a strong business case on things that are pretty tangible and fairly provable, and so addressing compliance risk, addressing kind of efficiency through eliminating manual processes. Those are things that are easier to see, that are easier to kind of prove and demonstrate, and that are going to be more persuasive to an ultimate decision maker. And then some of the kind of higher order benefits that you might get around employee engagement and employee attrition, we believe in them, but then they become the cream. You haven't built necessarily a business case just on those things. So I think being realistic about how you think about ROI and the conversations and the promises that you're making internally, that's critical. Then I think, and this kind of comes back to knowing yourself, knowing your needs, and then engaging with vendors in a more targeted way. That's the other thing that we try and educate our clients around. These kind of 100-page documents of tick and flick functionality, and
Yes.
that you get vendors to reply to. Everyone says they can do everything.
Yeah.
You need to understand what makes your business different. What are your unique needs? What are your killer scenarios? And then let's identify those 10 things, and then have a really deep dive with a vendor in the conversation and in the demonstrations. And then when we look at case studies and references, let's address those and get, strong confidence about them, those things that are important to us, that our business case is built on, and then you'll have more confidence about the decision that you've made. You haven't just kind of skimmed the surface of a 1,000 bits of functionality. You've identified what you need, what's going to make it work for you, and you've honed in on that. That's how I think you can, again, make a better decision and have confidence that the vendor you're partnering with is the right one for you.
I think to add to that, we've spoken about this is an investment. It should be an investment for minimum the next 10 years, right? As fast as software is evolving and new technology is coming out every single day, which might disrupt that further. But I think the idea of having something in your workplace for the next 10 years at a minimum, I think something that we like to double down on, and one particular customer that we're working with at the moment in a implementation capacity, we're helping them deploy a new HCM across their organization, is they're being realistic. I think that's a really great word that you touched on, and it's worth doubling down on, is being realistic in your goals, both in evaluating a tool that is aligned to what you're trying to achieve in the next 10 years, but also being realistic in your resourcing to do a successful deployment. Success to you as a business might look very different to the next one who actually is trying to go for a bit more of everything. They're trying to roll out everything at the same time in a longer period of time, compared to maybe a smaller business implementing their first HCM that just wants kind of the core functionality. And this customer that we're working with at the moment, he's a fantastic guy. The business is fantastic, but it's an old school business. It's been around for a long period of time, and they've never had a HR system. They're coming off Excel, and they're moving on to a modern, people-focused kind of HCM tool. I think the key thing to touch on this is when they're being realistic, what that actually looks like is they've recognized the opportunity to leverage this tool for the next 10 years and how much functionality is built into the software that they can use in future years to come. But the first year for them is they want to get the basics right. And so they've only got the core module within this particular HCM, but they've also recognized that it does have a lot more in it that they can leverage. And I think that's a really important component. So because of their resourcing, there's only a one-person HR kind of team. They're a business of 300. So, pretty big business for only having one HR resource. And given they can't dedicate their entire week to doing the deployment, they're being realistic in what their goals are for implementation as well. And that's been really refreshing. And I think the really key piece there for success is acknowledging where you're at as a business and what you're trying to get out of it.
I love that story, that a customer's they've recognized a need, they know that they've outgrown, paper, spreadsheet kind of model, and so they've seen the benefit of a contemporary system, but they're going in with their eyes wide open in terms of what is their bandwidth, what's their capacity and maturity as an organization to kind of absorb and leverage a system like this. And so I kind of come back to a couple of things. One, success isn't signing a contract with a vendor. Success isn't even having the system implemented. Success is when it's installed, it's live, it's integrated. You've gone through the change management process internally in your business to be using the tool effectively, and it's delivering you the ROI. That's the point we want to get customers to. Then the second point is, you've got to walk before you can run. So you are more likely to have a successful transformation process when an organization is doing what you've just described. We're going to go with the core module. We're going to kind of get the baseline working, And once you've got the fundamentals working, we talked about that before. Are we compliant? Are we integrated with our other systems? Are things working at a foundational level? When you do that, then you earn the right to kind of start to expand. You can start to bring in other modules. You can look at compensation or employee listening or learning and development. You can start to kind of broaden the HR horizon, get more leverage out of that tool that you've invested in, but it's only happening because you've got the fundamentals right. So I think, and this is a tool that you're going to have for 10 years. You don't have to do everything on day one. Growing into a system like that is actually a really powerful strategy for small companies embarking on this journey.
I couldn't agree more. I think, keeping it slow and steady and being realistic it's undersold. It really is. Going to change up the pace a little bit. I want to dive into a little bit around kind of the process. We are a champion. Let's imagine we're a champion in a business. We're in the HR function. We're a people leader. We know we need a new system, but we're not getting the support. What are some of the things they could be doing in building a business case to get further support from other champions across the organization? What are some of those key questions they could be asking the business to try and get some advocacy behind them?
You want to have a clear understanding of who are the kind of personas, who are the cohorts of groups inside your business that you believe are being negatively impacted by either the absence or kind of inadequate HR systems today. Is it frontline workforce? Is it people managers? Is it the HR function or finance or payroll function? Is it your executive level? So let's work out who are those groups and what are they not getting today that you feel they can and should be getting, that in order to do their jobs, in order to deliver on your business proposition. So that's how you can kind of start to build advocacy, build awareness and understanding about, it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to labour under manual systems. We don't have to double enter information over here and here. Starting to build that awareness in a broad way, not just kind of myopic, I'm the HR person, I'm just going to focus on my experience. That helps to build kind of a groundswell of support for an initiative like this. And again, we shouldn't undersell the importance or the kind of critical nature of doing a payroll replacement, doing an HR system implementation. It touches your entire workforce, so it's something you don't do lightly. So you want to have broad engagement and understanding and advocacy for what are the problems that we're facing and what are the potential solutions that we could be looking at.
And so to touch on the personas across the business, because it does touch everyone, and we're thinking about maybe a HR manager who's going out to market maybe for the first time, or maybe they've done this once or twice in the past, who should they be getting around them? What are these other personas that they could be kind of challenging internally to look for support? I think the default might be IT because we're looking at software. We might touch on that in a little bit more detail, but anyone else across the business that they could be looking for support from?
Finance and IT are always going to be key stakeholders in a decision like this. So engage with those people early. Understand, if there's constraints. If your tech team says, we only buy software that kind of meets this kind of a brief, that's great. Tell me what the constraints are now so that we can work within them, support your broader technology strategy, but still deliver on our needs. So I'd engage with those kind of folks early. But it's those kind of people I talked about before. Who are the people that are struggling right now? Maybe recruitment is a very manual process, and so your people leaders are stuck doing, a highly manual, labor-intensive process every time they want to bring on a new person. Understand what are the events that are driving the need, and get their support. That you hear them, you understand their pain, and that you can be the person rallying the business to drive a solution.
Yeah, I strongly agree. I think coming back, we've spoken about kind of key indicators and the challenges people might be facing. We've spoken a little bit around kind of the evaluation process, stakeholder engagement, the personas, how to kind of think about, giving yourself and the organization the power by working backwards with an ideal vendor profile rather than getting caught up into logos, previous experiences, or getting sucked into their sales cycle. Talk to me a little bit about, okay, I've got the tick, the CEO, the MD, the CPO, whoever it is has gone, I agree, we should look at some new tools. Where to from there, and how do we think about, a really strong business case to support that?
Well, I think that's where we come in. So, I'd like to think that if an organization has got to that point of, yep, there's a consensus view on the need for change, that's where we've started to talk about you face a crowded marketplace. It's hard to, while the concepts might be strong, starting to kind of quantify and demarcate areas of ROI and areas of return is challenging. And then how do I engage with that kind of vendor community? How do I think about timelines and planning for contracting implementation? Because you only replace these systems every 10 or more years, it's not the kind of muscle that organizations kind of typically have, particularly small businesses, 50 to 500, 50 to 1,000 people. They're just not doing this every day. And so you'd be forgiven for not being up to speed on the current state of the market and understanding how to run a procurement process. So if the general need is understood, how to go forward and take that next step, that's where a partner like us can help navigate that process and keep the business in control, doing it in a process and in a timeline of their choosing. So again, slightly self-serving, but that's where I think DD's got a strong role to play.
So we're talking about how, maybe they've got the consensus that they need to fix it. There's a clear need for change. They're facing these challenges with the current systems, and it's going okay. And I guess it's that kind of notion of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, talk to me about those guys.
Inertia is a powerful force. So we do have to work with customers to kind of present a case for change. And I actually think that's a good thing. I said it before, changing a payroll system, changing an HR system is a fundamental and large undertaking that will significantly impact a business. So you don't do that lightly. But that doesn't mean you don't do it. And so I think the whole if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality, what you're really doing is kicking the can down the road. So if it's around compliance issues, if it's around lack of integration, it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to see the kind of problems that would emerge ultimately if those kind of problems are left unfixed, unaddressed.
Yeah.
We're not paying people on time. We're not paying people accurately. We don't have the right, single source of truth of employee data. Those kind of things, when they do blow up, they blow up big.
Yeah.
And so I think that's, you want to be proactive. You want to be in control and addressing those things before they become an issue. That's on the kind of foundational compliance side. I think the other part of kind of positive reasons for growth and positive reasons for change, scalability. Too often we hear businesses who are going on a growth cycle, they're needing to recruit, significant numbers of people to support the demand that's out there, but they're suffering under kind of manual recruitment processes. So again, that's a real example. There is a direct and material drag on a business if your systems aren't supporting, critical functions like bringing on new people in a kind of not just a timely manner, but in engaging with those new candidates, giving them a good onboarding experience, giving them a good kind of new employee experience. If that's not happening, that's creating a cost on the business. And so, again, we want to put people in control. We want to give them the confidence that they can make a decision, make a good decision with robust support and underpinnings that will meet their business needs. So yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it is a kind of easy, if somewhat lazy, kind of aphorism to throw out there. But I think there's powerful reasons that a sponsor can kind of rebut those kind of questions.
Talk to me about people who go, okay, when we go through the whole process and then they just can't get through to the other side. They're scared of the change, they're scared of the decision. How do they find comfort in making the decision and holding firm on, we know we need to make the change, we're going to do it this time?
It's easy to be gun shy, and everyone in business at some point in their career has touched and been impacted by some sort of failed technology project. So the scars are there. People, there's understandable reasons to kind of pull back and kind of not pull the trigger on making a decision. And again, insanity is kind of continuing to do the same thing and expect a different result. So I guess our advice there to customers would be, what did you do or not do last time that either led to a decision not being made, or if you did go down a pathway with a technology, what went wrong? So that we can address and embed that into our advice, into our recommendations, in order to get a different result this time around.
Yes.
So you got to, again, and I said it earlier, I love that our business model is thinking about the full life cycle. So we don't view success as just signing up a new contract. It's got to be smoothly, on time, on budget implementation, and then with change management and actual business impact being realised. So that's where a guide, where an advisor like us can help them address the concerns of the past, the kind of the issues that they've faced, but come up with a robust, fit-for-purpose plan to get them through a transformation. And yeah, when you do it and do it well, the payoff is huge.
What about the people who recognize the need for new tools across their business but don't yet kind of have those steps of getting kind of advocacy, a steering committee together, putting together a business case, or maybe they're not feeling enough of the pain to really see the transformation project come to life, but they're intrigued. What's out there? They're a bit excited. Who are some of the new software players? Who are, what's happening in this space? What would you talk about the people at the very beginning of their journey? What exists in the market before going to the software people, looking at a logo and then getting sucked into a sales process?
I think it's great to be educated. That kind of curiosity of, I don't have a burning need now, but I want to stay ahead of the curve. I want to educate myself on what's out there. That's a great place to be, because then not only can you go on a journey in a kind of a time frame that makes sense for you, you can take others internally on a journey with you. You can be talking to sponsors and decision makers to say, listen, I actually think kind of 12, 24 months out is when we need to be thinking about a new HR system, but we're going to be starting to kind of pave the way now. We're going to be starting to document areas of our business where we're kind of seeing pressure, where we're seeing tension, where we're seeing potential areas of improvement. So we're going to be starting to build a business case from the grassroots up now, and at the same time we're going to be starting to educate ourselves about the market, about what's out there, about what our options are, so that it doesn't all just kind of hit us, like a landslide all at once.
In a reaction.
Yeah. So we're going to be, we're taking control. So I think someone in that place, that's a really good realization to make. And so again, we're here, come and have a coffee with us and we can talk about, what's out there and how you might think about the process, even if there's no kind of short-term, need or kind of outcome that's tied to it.
I think everyone knows HR's got it pretty rough. They wear so many different hats, particularly in these sub 1,000 businesses. They're doing recruitment, performance management, all the other roles that come with HR, onboarding, offboarding. They need technology to really empower them to become more efficient, to become more valuable as practitioners, like you said, to the organization. But I think something that is probably looked over a little bit when looking at new tools and technology is the risk associated to getting the decision wrong. There's a lot of weight on that HR professional to go to market and advocate for a tool, to be the sponsor and make a recommendation to the business, how can we de-risk it for them?
Don't go it alone, or you're not alone. Firstly, start to engage internally. And again, your IT department, your technologist, your CTO, make them a partner. Make them an advocate. Go on that journey together. Because if you start rushing ahead, engaging with vendors, thinking about solutions without, bringing on that key stakeholder, I think that risks kind of driving a wedge in the business. So don't go it alone. And then the other part is there is support. That's what, advisors like ourselves are there to enable and empower and educate you around, because you're an HR practitioner. It's not reasonable to expect that you're a technologist, you're across all of the tools in the marketplace, and that you're experienced in going through a kind of a detailed procurement process. So I would say don't feel as though you have to take that on all on your own.
Step one is getting support and actually understanding what those needs are, the pain points are across the business, not going out and looking at all the different logos, because there simply just are too many pages on Google for you to actually find those answers.
Start internally understanding your business and your business needs. And when you start to identify and articulate and capture and document that, and you're doing it with your other stakeholders, with your CEO, with your operations manager, with your team leaders, and they're seeing it, or even better, they're bringing those kind of examples and experience to you, that's where you get a broad consensus, a broad understanding in your business that, we have a need.
Yeah.
What we've got today isn't going to get us there where we need to go as a business.
So we're advisors. There's a clear need for digital directions in the market to support HR practitioners purchase, contract, evaluate the best-in-class technology that's aligned to their unique needs. What can someone expect coming to digital directions, or maybe someone who's never used an advisor in this HR space before? How do we really partner with them?
As experts in this space, doing it every day, we've been able to develop and hone really good, robust methodologies for how to go about doing discovery, understanding your situation, understanding your problems, how to do good stakeholder analysis, how to build a business case that's realistic, that starts to quantify potential benefits, capture potential risks. And then we've got a kind of strong relationships and understanding with all those vendors out in the market. We can start to kind of boil the ocean and kind of reduce that complexity, that paradox of choice, to help you start to make kind of a guided decision. So that's a process that we're doing every day. We can kind of fast track, we can hone that for you, and that it doesn't replace your decision. This is still your decision. We're a resource, we're a support for you to kind of arrive at that decision, and to do it faster, better, and cheaper than perhaps you would be able to do on your own, because everyone's busy, everyone's got a day job. Doing this project around implementing a new HR system, it's never someone's dedicated job. It's always on top of what you're doing today. Yeah. So if you don't want this to kind of drag on for weeks and months or even years, that's where seeking external support can help create urgency, create momentum in this kind of a project. And it gives a degree of independence when you can give your opinion to a sponsor, to a decision maker, but say I've sought external advice and here's what they say. It just helps. It helps support and validate kind of the process. So we think that's something that can be done in a pretty streamlined way.
Look, David, I wish we could talk all day, but we're at time. I really appreciate the conversation. Thanks so much for being here. Now, anyone can find us on our socials. We're going to have some more podcasts coming out, but also it sounds like we're going to have a few complimentary coffees together.
Jack, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed the conversation. There's so much rich territory for discussing this kind of stuff together, and I look forward to more podcast conversations and more customer conversations to talk about HR systems.
Thanks so much.
Pleasure. Cheers.